What's up, meta nerds? Today's video is all about the ATTE, the All-Terrain Tactical Enforcer. The ATTE was developed by Rothana Heavy Engineering, the company that also brought us the LAAT gunship. This massive tank was 22 meters or 70 feet long, which is the same as a 7-story building, and just a little bit longer than two M1 Abrams tanks. And at 9.57 meters or 31 feet, an ATTE was actually taller than a 3-story building. And even with this huge size, the ATTE still had a respectable max speed of 60 kilometers per hour or 37 miles per hour. Its 6-legged design made it very sturdy. This combined with its low center of gravity meant that you would never see an ATTE getting pushed over. And because each of these legs moved independently, it could climb over all kinds of difficult terrain. But a really genius part of its design was this flexible middle part. You see this used on a lot of those big double buses. This allows you to have an extremely large vehicle without having a ridiculous turn radius. So this combination of features meant that it couldn't be knocked down, nothing could get in its way, and it was still maneuverable enough to be effective. A couple of interesting bonus features: some were able to take a page out of the Crab Droid's playbook and scale right up the vertical wall surfaces of canyons. And they were all pressurized, meaning, like Anakin Skywalker showed, you could actually take them into space and navigate the terrain of an enemy ship via the magnetic clamps on its feet. But in order to call it a tank, we need to talk about its firepower. The Tactical Enforcer had 6 laser turrets, 4 in the front and 2 in the back. The 4 in the front protected the relatively exposed pilot, and the 2 in the back made sure that this thing couldn't get snuck up on. They were mostly used against enemy infantry, and actually had the same amount of energy as the ball turrets on a LAAT, firing into their enemies the equivalent of a lightning bolt. Each of these gunners got to stay in the safe, protected cabin of the ATTE, but its main gunner was exposed on the swivel seat that rested on top of the ship. This connected to the mass driver accelerator, the same type of technology used in the LAAT for its main cannons. So just like with the gunship, it had a wide range of different mission-specific loadouts. Of course, the standard high explosive rounds, but also other shells like armor penetrating, bunker busters which were able to burrow deep in the ground, heat-seeking projectiles, sonic charges, and there's no reason to believe that it couldn't fire other things like the LAAT could, such as the radiation and heat dispensing ordnance. But a good tank also needs defense. Of course, it had really thick armor plating, but what's really special is that the material used was highly conductive. When a bolt hit the AT-AT, it would spread out its energy across the entire hull, making it very unlikely that a bolt would be able to punch through the armor and hurt the clones inside. And speaking of the clones, it was able to carry up to 20 passengers, 10 in the front section and 10 in that back section, which is pretty interesting because the LAAT was only able to carry 30 troops at a time. And if we include all the crew, a pilot, a spotter, 4 gunners, and a turret gunner on top, including the 20 inside, an LAAT could choose between 30 clone troopers to drop off or dropping off an ATTE with 27 clone troopers inside. Now these things were such a success, they were used throughout the Clone Wars, and we actually see some ATTEs modified to fit some mission-specific goals. Sometimes an ATTE would carry 2 ATRTs into battle, so the big walker could give birth to 2 little walkers. And sometimes ATTEs would be turned into mobile command centers. So it's pretty cool that commanders would actually be inside of an ATTE, processing all the data of the battlefield and coordinating other ATTEs. Now all of this is of course very awesome, but no machine is perfect and there were definitely some flaws in this design. Now I know I said that being low to the ground was awesome and meant that you couldn't be tipped over. But this also meant that you were very close to mines. And there were a ton of ATTEs that were destroyed or disabled because the weaker belly side of this tank was simply too close to the exploding anti-tank landmines. And in the very first battle of the Clone Wars, we see how Hellfire tanks were able to exploit certain weaker areas of the ATTE's armor. Although the armor itself was excellent, it gave up coverage for increased maneuverability. We see that this rocket was able to hit it right in a joint area and takes out the great ATTE in just one shot. After the Clone Wars, these things are actually used by the Empire as well, but without the LAAT to help shuffle them around the battlefield, they definitely weren't the main focus of the Imperial Army, and they ended up kind of just serving on backwater planets in the Outer Rim, or being stuck on less technologically advanced worlds. Interestingly, a Weequay gang also got a hold of one, and ended up using it to intimidate and steal money from visitors to their planet. And so the last time that we actually hear about an ATTE is one being damaged by Han Solo and Chewbacca, when they get into a little scuffle with this gang. But before we go, I definitely want to talk about some cool facts and some behind-the-scenes stuff. One interesting fact is that the AT-AT is actually the spiritual successor to the AT-TE, and one of the reasons why it was so high up was to make sure that it couldn't be taken out by landmines like its predecessor. It's pretty comical that when we're introduced to the AT-AT, we see that the creators forgot about the whole center of gravity having 6 legs thing, but in its defense it was designed at a different time and for a different reason. It's also interesting to note that its designers over at Rothana Heavy Engineering kind of modeled the ATTE after a local animal called the Arctic Horny Whelmer. It was said to have a really wide body and a large squatting stance. Another feature of its armor was that it was impervious to ion damage, but also because of its slow speed and lack of repulsor lift technology, the ATTE could just step right through electromagnetic shielding, a pretty important feature. And a really cool behind the scenes fact was that the script for episode 2 wanted to show off the technological predecessor to the AT-AT. And although it was in CGI, one of the computer animators had also previously worked on the stop motion animation for the AT-AT walkers back during the Empire Strikes Back production. So it's pretty cool that although a lot of people hated the CGI from the prequels, there were literally some of the people that were involved in the practical effects from the original trilogy that were involved with making the animations for these new vehicles. Well, that's it for the AT-TE, the All-Terrain Tactical Enforcer. If you liked it, go ahead and hit that like button. And if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe, because we're making videos like this every single day. If you want to study Star Wars even further, there's tons of great free stuff online like Wikipedia or other people on YouTube. But if you want some of the source material, go ahead and click on that link in our description below. It takes you to one book in particular, but be sure to browse around and see if there's anything you like. And any purchase that you make through that link shoots us back a small percentage, so that we can help this channel grow to the point that one day we might be able to do this full time, which would be an absolute dream come true. But more important than all of that, remember, the Force will be with you. And if you're that top gunner on an AT-TE, you're kinda gonna need it. I mean, seriously, how do they decide who has to be on the outside? Everybody else is nice and cozy? You need to find better friends, man. And now, some bloopers while you think about what to watch next. With a Tospy, the AT-AT made its first appearance during the Battle of Wait. It had a bunch of bust them up real good, see? The LAAT would drop off AT-TEs, which contained AT-RTs and R2-D2. Oh my god.